Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're exploring a peculiar and troubling trend in Ukraine. Kyiv faces a surprising comeback story no one asked for. Pro-Russian politicians exiled and imprisoned for treason are now trending online with videos praising Donald Trump and attacking Volodymyr Zelensky. We're going to explore what has happened to the members of Russian sympathizers and what happened to them after the 2022 full-scale invasion. Are these jail-bound influencers trying to promote peace or merely executing the Kremlin's latest plan to destabilize Ukraine? Now let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
This is Viktor Medvetchuk. He is one of the most high-profile individuals that Ukraine exchanged with Russia since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. During the most recent prisoner exchange, claimed to be the largest one since the outset of the war, a close aide of Medvetchuk's was exchanged for Ukrainian prisoners, Alexander Tarnashinski. Just like his friend, he is closely connected to Russia. He set up NGOs backed by Russian funding, meant to discredit the Ukrainian government. An unsurprising turn of events given Medvedchuk's own history of comments like these.
I know very well that the peace in the Donbass can only be restored with the help of Russia.
This isn't the only pro-Russian Ukrainian citizen to have made headlines recently. Ex-MP Andriy Portnov, who was a senior aide to disgraced former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, was found dead in Madrid after being shot. While in Ukraine, he was known for threatening journalists and suing several media companies. The US imposed sanctions on him in 2021 for alleged corruption, saying he had used his influence in the judiciary and law enforcement to buy access to Ukrainian courts and undermine various reform efforts.
Now let's zone in on the East planning portion of our show. Prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, there were several prominent pro-Russian parties and politicians who were active in the country's politics. Now here's a brief overview of some of the most notable examples.
One common thread uniting all of Ukraine's pro-Russian parties and politicians was opposition to further integration with Western structures like the EU and NATO, and a push towards improved ties with the Russian Federation. One of the most prominent pro-Russian Ukrainian politicians was one of Putin's close allies, Viktor Medvetchuk, and his opposition platform For Life. By 2019, it was Ukraine's second largest party and enjoyed high levels of support in Ukraine's south and east, where there are many Russian-speaking Ukrainians. The party was banned in the wake of Russia's full-scale invasion, and Medvedchuk himself was handed over to Russia in a prisoner swap in September 2022. Another influential pro-Russian figure was former Prime Minister Mykola Azarov, who served under former President Viktor Yanukovych. He lost power when Yanukovych was ousted in the wake of the 2014 Euromaidan protests. Despite the obvious clash of interests between these individuals and parties in Ukrainian statehood, the country's political system tolerated them even after the illegal annexation of Crimea. Some observers point out that back then there were fears of a Russian reprisal should Ukraine try to abolish these parties altogether.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. 3 years ago, after Moscow's forces devastated the country, pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine became, so to say, severely unwelcome. Now, their party, the so-called opposition Platform for Life, was banned, with members imprisoned or exiled. Yet today, some of these same figures, like Alexander Dubinsky, are staging a comeback. Broadcasting from prison cells in exile in London, he's promoting a blend of pro-Trump and anti-Zelensky propaganda. Now, we're talking about a former Ukrainian MP convicted of treason who now films TikTok videos behind bars, claiming Ukraine's government, not Russia's, is the real villain here. His audience has gone from 40,000 viewers to nearly 1.6 million, fueled by incendiary claims echoing Russian propaganda. That includes accusing Zelensky's government of genocide and labeling Ukraine a dictatorship. But Dubinsky isn't alone. Yuri Boyko, another former opposition platform leader, mysteriously resurfaced on TikTok after years of silence. His message? That so-called Ukrainian radicals, a favorite Kremlin boogeyman, are suppressing Russian speakers. Boyko's newfound passion for social media just happened to coincide perfectly with Moscow's push for elections in Ukraine, suggesting this online renaissance might actually be coordinated more closely with the Kremlin's calendar than TikTok's algorithm. Now let's talk about timing. Russia recently unveiled a cynical three-step plan proposing a ceasefire, immediate elections, and a subsequent peace treaty with a presumably friendlier Ukrainian leader. Conveniently, these online agitators are parroting exactly that script, trying to sow division within Ukraine. Political analysts see through this strategy, noting these pro-Russian figures aim to fracture Ukrainian unity precisely when it's most crucial. Most Ukrainian politicians, including opposition figures genuinely critical of Zelensky, firmly agree elections during wartime would only benefit Moscow. Now, while democracy demands elections, holding them amid ongoing war is turning a democratic tool into Russia's weapon of choice. These pro-Russian politicians are trying to exploit wartime divisions, pitting veterans against civilians, refugees against those who stayed, and distracting Ukraine from its existential struggle. These cynical tactics aim at prolonging conflict through manufactured infighting. Ukraine's pro-Russian figures aren't staging a comeback because they have new ideas or genuine popular support. Instead, they're leveraging divisive propaganda and digital manipulation to amplify Moscow's wartime strategy. Now, their goal is simple yet sinister: destabilize Ukraine from within, exploit Western political divisions, and ultimately hand Russia the keys to Kyiv. The war for Ukraine's sovereignty isn't only fought on battlefields around Kharkiv or Kherson. It's also waged on our screens, and misleading narratives are designed to confuse, divide, and conquer. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Professor Alexei Haran, Research Director at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Professor, so glad to have you here with us on Eastern Express. Let me ask you this. What is the current state of pro-Russian political factions in Ukraine, particularly after the full-scale invasion in 2022?
Well, after the full-scale invasion, actually, the real aims of Russia were revealed even for those who didn't understand it previously. And the thing is that actually those Ukrainians who are Russian speakers, they were mainly concentrated in the east of Ukraine. And they suffered their losses and their sufferings were the greatest among the whole Ukrainians. Why? Because they were closer to the border and they were bombarded by Russians. So Russians were talking that, okay, we are going to defend the rights of Russian speakers or Russians, but in fact, they bombarded, firstly, Russians and Russian speakers. Okay, so that's led definitely to huge changes in Ukrainian approach to Russia, and also among those who are Russian speakers. So, as a result, the trust towards pro-Russian parties, the largest of them was oppositional platform for life. In the parliament, they had 20 deputies out of 450, but support decreased. And because this party and other parties, they were supporting the Russian aggression, so they were prohibited. They were officially prohibited. So we may say that their influence definitely was greatly reduced. However, and this also reflects, the changes among Ukrainians about within the Russian speakers after the start of this full-scale invasion. But if we are talking about their presence in Ukrainian politics, well, they still have a faction in the parliament, which I have already mentioned, but because the party officially was banned, but they retain the faction, not of the party, but, they organized a group which was basically called Platform for Peace, Russian terminology, that those who are pro-Russian, they want peace. This is not the case, definitely, but they have this title, Platform for Peace, and they're still in Ukrainian parliament.
Let me ask you this now. Ukraine handed over just recently 70 people to Russia as part of a prisoner exchange on the 23rd of May, including, I'm sure you're familiar with the name, Alexander Tarnashinski. He was an associate of Viktor Medvetchuk, a former Ukrainian businessman and a pro-Russian politician who was also known for his ties to Vladimir Putin. Now, reportedly, Tarnashinski was convicted of collaborating with Russian secret services. I want you to give your insight on that. And why do you think Ukraine agreed to release him firstly? Was this a political compromise, or was this a humanitarian calculation before we go into the effects?
Look, we need to release our prisoners of the war. And that's why we are ready, to exchange even collaborators for those Ukrainians, for our soldiers, for defendants of Azov, of Mariupol. So yes, we're exchanging. Actually, Medvedchuk himself, he was exchanged for a number of Ukrainian prisoners. That's why it happens. That's why they are included into this exchange of prisoners. By the way, I have found the numbers. So, as I have said, we have 10% of Ukrainians who are Russian speakers, and out of this number, 10% are still positive towards Russia. So basically, that would mean 1% of the population of Ukrainians.
So you think that do you think that these Russian? Okay, you're giving me a figure here. So now, do you think that these this percentage of Russian speakers have still? Would you say then that this pro-Russian ideology has still survived in Ukraine amidst the war in present day?
As I have said, 1% of Ukrainians and 10% of Russian speakers. So it's, I don't think this is a large number, but these people, they may vote for some pro-Russia. Well, these parties, the new parties after elections, they will not be openly pro-Russian, but they will try, to speculate on some issues. For example, okay, we need economic ties to improve our economy. Our economy is in bad shape because of war, so why shouldn't we restart the trade with Russia? So there are such people, even we are a democratic country, so we have different points of views. Well, you are in the midst of your presidential elections, and we know that among Poles there are very, very different views also regarding geopolitics and foreign policy issues. So we still have, during the war. So I don't think this is a surprising fact, but the parties may speculate on that.
Professor, let me ask you. I just want to go back to the exchange. But doesn't Ukraine fear that the fact that Ukraine returns these collaborators, these Moscow collaborators, how would their return actually benefit the Kremlin? Are they simply symbolic? Are they going to be is Russia going to be able to use them as operational assets once again?
No, I don't think so, because these people will stay in Russia, so they will not come back to Ukraine, because here we will have criminal causes against them, so they're not able to return to Ukraine. Their popularity is very low in Ukraine. Medvedchuk, by the way, himself, as a person, he was never popular in Ukraine. So their assets, they are under arrest. So I don't think so.
Let me ask you about the actual safety of exiled pro-Russian elites. We saw the killing of Andrei Portnov in Spain recently. What about that? Do you believe it was an internal settling of scores, a Russian intelligence hit, or something else? And like I mentioned, what does his assassination say about that safety of exiled pro-Russian elites? Are they still useful to Moscow? Can they be now seen as liabilities, for instance?
They're trying to use these people, at least some of them, Well, regarding Portnov, yes, he had connections in Ukraine before the war and important connections in Ukraine. So Russia was trying to use. Okay, let's not forget that Russia was involved in many special operations on the territory of Ukraine before 2014 and even before 2022. Okay, because they would like to have puppets within Ukraine. So, but since the start of full-scale invasion, the situation started to be changed. Regarding Portnov, he lost a lot of influence, previous influence, but he still retained some of this influence. And I believe, yes, you are right. I think the main version is that he knew too much. And some of the people within Russian secret forces or Russian, shadow circles, Russian mafia, they decided to get rid of him.
Let me ask you this, Professor. What do you think? Just a humanitarian aspect of that, about all these people that we just mentioned, what do you think drives someone to actually betray their own country, not just ideologically, but to actively, in a way, from everything that's been going on, to this naturally would mean that they support Russia's invasion, destruction of their homeland. It must be something just more than money and belief. What would you say about that?
Well, okay, so you Poles, you were under Russian Empire, you had communist regime, so you knew how, Russia, Russian empires and the Soviet Union, they may use their networks in order to undermine the situation from within the country and to control the country. Okay, so we had even worse experience, okay, because even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia still had a lot of, network of KGB agents within Ukraine, a lot of different shadow ties. And yes, there were people in Ukraine after collapse of the Soviet Union, especially among some part of oligarchs, of politicians who were pro-Russian. Okay, their number was decreasing during all this year, but they were active in Ukraine, especially under pro-Russian President Yanukovych, which was before 2014. So Russia, as I have said, Russia was trying, to use these ties. So there were many reasons for that. And some of these people, they sincerely hated Ukrainian state and believe in great Russia. And unfortunately, during different wars, in all the wars, there are collaborators, so yes, we had it all as well. We had it, that's right. But the main thing for us is that Putin actually, he believed that because we had a lot of Russian influence, a lot of Russian cultural presence, a lot of people who were Russian. Look, I was a Russian speaker because I was born in the Soviet Union in Russified family. So Putin believed that all those people would support him, and that wasn't the case at all. So Ukrainians united, including Russian-speaking Ukrainians. But some of them, yes, they decided, to be part of Russian influence, of Russian ideology and Russian tool in order to transform Ukraine into a puppet state. Okay, yes, we had this, but they failed.
Right.
So if they would try to, most of them, again, they are outside of Ukraine. I don't think that they will reemerge in Ukraine. No way. But, Russia may continue to play on some Ukrainians who are tired of war, who are very economically depressed. And Russia is suggesting to them, okay, we are going to help you, let's restore normal relations, and all these things of Russian propaganda, all these bluffs.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexei Haran, Research Director at the Democratic Initiatives Center, for being with us here on Eastern Express and for all your insight here this morning.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.
And we we move on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Russia is hard at work modernizing its nuclear arms infrastructure. A huge leak of Russian military files obtained by Danish and German journalists has revealed the massive scale of this process.
Since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin has been more than eager to reach for nuclear rhetoric. These aren't just empty threats, it seems, as Moscow has been busy modernizing its entire nuclear infrastructure. All across the country, sites like Yasny Base have been upgraded to be more efficient at hosting intercontinental ballistic missiles. These upgrades include new electric fence systems, barracks and surveillance, in addition to networks of underground tunnels. In other parts of Russia, entire bases have reportedly been basically torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. This data has been obtained due to Russia's procurement platforms being poorly secured. Confidential tenders and other important documents located there are publicly accessible. It is important to note that officially Russian nuclear doctrine prohibits the country from what is commonly called a first use of nuclear weapons, though Moscow has become increasingly reliant on its arsenal as a deterrent against the West.
Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, also known as SVR, has accused Serbia's defense industry of supplying arms to Ukraine. Now, Belgrade is officially neutral when it comes to the war, but has maintained close ties with Russia.
Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić is one of the very few European leaders who has met with Vladimir Putin since Russia invaded Ukraine. He has gone so far as to attend Russia's annual Victory Day parade a few weeks ago. Yet despite this cordial relationship with Russia's leader, it seems that his country is not immune from accusations tossed out by Russian institutions. The SVR claims that at least 7 Serbian defense companies have sent hundreds of thousands of rockets and millions of small arms cartridges to Ukraine using allegedly fake end-user certificates. The SVR called this a, quote, attempt to stab Russia in the back. In 2024, the Financial Times released a report according to which Serbia was to have exported roughly $900 million worth of ammunition to Ukraine via a third country since the war's beginning.
A wrench may have just been thrown in Russian designs for Kazakhstan's first nuclear power plant. China is apparently seeking to elbow Russia out of the deal.
Russia's Rosatom has long been considered on track to receive the construction contract for Kazakhstan's first nuclear power plant. The China National Nuclear Corporation, however, seems to be just as interested and is reportedly hoping to win it at the wire. China is reportedly not just proposing to build the plant, but also offering to handle the nuclear fuel cycle and bolster technical infrastructure. Reports indicate that the Chinese bid is receiving special attention from Kazakh officials, as Beijing's offer also apparently has a decent price on its side. The CNNC claims it can build 2 reactors for roughly $5.5 billion, as opposed to the projected 12 to 15 billion in the case of Rosatom or its South Korean and French competitors. The deadline for a decision on the matter is reportedly the end of June 2025.
And that's all for this edition of Eastern Express. I'm Diana Skaya, but stay with us here on TVP World.